Emma, a 17-year-old high school senior, was thrilled when her parents decided to take a weekend trip, leaving her in charge of the house. She saw it as an opportunity for a relaxing, solo movie night. She made popcorn, curled up on the couch, and queued up her favorite horror movie. By the time the credits rolled, it was almost midnight. Emma turned off the TV and sat in silence, scrolling through her phone. That's when she heard a faint tapping sound coming from upstairs. Initially, she brushed it off. The house was old, prone to creaks and groans, especially at night. But as the minutes passed, the tapping grew louder, almost rhythmic, like someone drumming their fingers on the floor. Feeling uneasy, Emma decided to investigate. She grabbed her flashlight and slowly ascended the stairs. "Hello," she called, trying to sound confident. Silence. When she reached the top of the staircase, she noticed something strange. The door to her bedroom, which she was sure she had closed earlier, was slightly ajar. Her heart started pounding. She pushed the door open with trembling hands. The room appeared normal, nothing out of place. Letting out a shaky breath, she convinced herself she was imagining things. She turned to leave but froze. In the mirror on her vanity, she saw it, a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room, just behind her. Emma spun around, but the corner was empty. The mirror, however, still reflected the figure. Panicking, she stumbled backward and sprinted downstairs, locking herself in the kitchen. She grabbed a knife and called 911. The operator assured her that officers were on their way. As she waited, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. They weren't hurried or erratic. They were calm, purposeful, like whoever or whatever was in her house wanted her to know it was coming. Emma clenched the knife tighter, her breathing ragged. The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen door. She could feel its presence on the other side. Suddenly, the door swung open, but there was no one there. She screamed as a loud bang erupted from the living room. The police arrived moments later, finding Emma huddled in the corner, sobbing. The officers searched the house but found no sign of an intruder. The mystery deepened when they checked the security cameras her parents had installed just 2 weeks earlier. The footage showed Emma walking up the stairs, entering her room, and then running back down. But what shocked everyone was the figure behind her. It wasn't a shadow. It was a man dressed in black, his face obscured by a mask. The twist: when the officers reviewed the rest of the footage, they discovered something horrifying. The man hadn't entered the house that night. He had been hiding in their attic for days, crawling down only when the family was asleep. The real nightmare began when they climbed into the attic and found a nest of blankets, food wrappers, and a notebook. Inside were pages filled with chilling, handwritten notes about Emma, her daily routines, the times she was alone, and even a crude sketch of her room. As the officers took the evidence away, Emma overheard one of them mutter, "There's no way he left on foot in this storm. He's still close." For weeks after, Emma couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow felt like he was still there, watching, waiting. Jake was a college sophomore spending the weekend house visiting for his aunt in a remote, countryside home. Nestled at the edge of a forest, her house was quiet, surrounded by tall trees that cast long shadows even in the moonlight. Jake figured it would be a peaceful escape from campus life, but he couldn't shake the eerie isolation of the place. On his first night, a storm rolled in, rain pelted the windows, and the wind howled through the trees. Jake curled up on the couch with a book, the crackle of the fireplace the only comforting sound in the otherwise empty house. At around 10 p.m., a loud knock echoed through the house. Jake froze, his eyes darting toward the front door. It seemed odd who would be out in this weather. Hesitant, he approached the door and peered through the peephole. No one was there. Shrugging it off as his imagination, or perhaps the wind knocking a tree branch against the house, Jake returned to his book. But 15 minutes later, the knock came again, this time louder and more insistent. Jake's heart began to race. He checked the peephole once more, only to find the porch empty again. Growing uneasy, he double-checked the locks on all the doors and windows before returning to the living room. The night grew darker, and the storm intensified. Around midnight, the knocking resumed, this time at the back door. Jake jumped at the sound. Slowly, he crept to the kitchen, where the back door was located. The knocking stopped just as he reached it. He flicked on the porch light and looked out the small window on the door. Nothing. No footprints, No sign of anyone, just rain hammering against the glass. Jake decided to call his aunt. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. He left a shaky message, asking if she'd ever experienced anything strange at the house, but didn't receive a reply. By 2 a.m., Jake had barricaded himself in the living room, armed with a baseball bat. He told himself it was just the storm playing tricks on him. But deep down, he felt like someone or something was outside, watching. The knocking began again, louder than ever, and it was no longer confined to one door. It was coming from multiple points around the house: the front door, the back door, even the windows. Jake's breath quickened as the pounding grew relentless, almost frantic, as if whoever or whatever was outside was desperate to get in. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Jake's only source of light was the faint glow from the fireplace. Gripping the bat tightly, he backed into a corner, his eyes darting toward every shadow that seemed to grow and shift in the flickering light. Then he heard a low whisper coming from the kitchen. It was faint but unmistakable. Jake ... Let me in. His blood ran cold. He hadn't told anyone he was house visiting. How did they know his name? Summoning his courage, he yelled, "Who's there?" "What do you want?" No answer, just silence. Jake stayed awake until dawn, his heart pounding in his chest. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, the knocking finally stopped. When he mustered the courage to step outside, he found something chilling: muddy footprints circling the entire house, leading to every door and window. Some of the prints were smeared, as if whoever made them had been crawling at times. The police arrived later that morning after Jake reported the incident. They searched the property and surrounding woods but found no one. However, the officers noticed something disturbing. There were no tire tracks or other signs of a vehicle approaching the house. "Looks like they came on foot," one of the officers said. "But in this weather, through the woods? It doesn't make sense." The twist: when Jake's aunt finally returned home, she found an envelope tucked under the doormat. Inside was a Polaroid photo of Jake asleep on the couch taken from just outside the living room window. Jake moved out of state shortly after, but the memory of that night haunted him for years. He often wondered if whoever was outside had truly left or if they were still out there, waiting for their next chance. Leela was 14 years old when her parents left her in charge of babysitting her 8-year-old brother, Max. She had done it many times before and usually enjoyed the quiet evenings. That night, after tucking Max into bed, she settled on the couch with her phone, scrolling through social media. Around 10 p.m., the landline rang, a rare occurrence since her family mostly used their cell phones. Curious, she answered. A low, raspy voice whispered, "Have you checked the children?" Leela's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly dismissed it as a prank call. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. The caller hung up without answering. She put the phone down and tried to focus on her screen, but she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. Minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, the same voice hissed, "I'm closer than you think." Panic set in. Leela ran upstairs to check on Max, finding him sound asleep. Relieved but still scared, she locked the doors and windows, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and called 911. The dispatcher assured her that officers were on their way, but as she hung up, the phone rang again. "I can see you," the voice whispered. Leela froze, her eyes darting around the darkened house. She felt like she was being watched. When the police arrived, they searched the house but found no sign of anyone. However, they discovered muddy footprints leading up from the basement to the living room, and chillingly, the landline calls had been made from inside the house. The police suspected that whoever had been in the basement slipped out during the chaos. Leela and her family never found out who it was, but for years, she couldn't sleep without triple-checking the locks on every door and window.